Hi, welcome to Abuela's Counter. I'm Annie, and I'm a classically trained chef, but I learned most of what I know about the kitchen through my grandmothers.
I'm Cristy. I'm an at-home chef, and I also learned everything that I kind of know from my Abuela and my tia.
Just kind of.
Just kind of, or everything. And we wanted to come together and share with you guys what we learned here at this counter.
When I think about what's the most quintessential Cuban meal, there's so many options, so many things that I love, that we grew up with.
Yeah.
But I always go back to Ropa Vieja.
Me too. And then I saw it in that new Father of the Bride movie.
Which was amazing.
Which was so good with Auntie Garcia and Gloria Estefan. They're like our little Cuban tia and tío. And it was like, right when the family comes, the daughter comes home from school, they're making a meal. And naturally, it was Ropa Vieja, white rice with black beans. And it just captured so perfectly what we all kind of experienced growing up. Like, that's the meal that Abuela would make, or that your mom would make, like on a big Sunday meal occasion, like on a...
I think what I love about it too is that it's good for a Tuesday, but it's special enough for like a welcome home or a Saturday or something like that. Agreed.
So today we're gonna be making Ropa Vieja.
With rice and black beans. Okay, so when we're making something like Ropa Vieja, we want to use an inexpensive cut of beef. So something like a flank steak would work really, really well. So you want to use either flank, or if not, you want to use brisket. If you're using brisket, that's fine. Leave the fat cap on because that gives a lot of flavor to your broth. But eventually, obviously, you'll take it off. And then, like any meat, once it's boiled, don't worry about the meat raw that has like all these little things. Once it's boiled, it'll be much easier to kind of pull apart all those little nerves and like any tendons. Get yourself a pot that will fit the meat properly. And then in the pot,
you want to show them?
We could just have some flavorings, yeah. So we have bay leaves.
And a ton of garlic.
But
if you like to use something else, like let's say you like your beef to be flavored differently, what else could somebody use? Like,
for sure, onions.
If you could throw an onion in there, you could throw less garlic, more garlic.
Yeah, different things. I mean, people go crazy with it. I would say save your flavorings for after. I would never put at this point too much salt or too much sazon, because you just want to, it's layers, and this is just your first layer.
Do you want to use salt at all?
We're going to use a little bit of salt, but not too much. The reason for that is because we are cooking it for so long, and what happens is that then it'll really intensify. Okay. So think of this kind of like a broth. You don't want to add in so much salt at the beginning because it's just going to cook down and become too intense, too salty.
All right,
let's go. So let's take this, we'll fill it up, and we'll boil it.
So while your meat is boiling, that's like the perfect time for you to go and start making your beans.
Right, that's why we start always with whatever takes the longest. That's our first thing that we're going to start with.
Right, and then this kind of takes the next longest, so you want to kind of get it going fairly quickly. There's a little bit of a debate between, I have to use fresh beans versus canned beans because they taste better, or they don't. I mean, you can't get caught up in that, because really you could only do your fresh beans if you have the thing
with dried beans, they're awesome, and I'm very disciplined about boiling a bunch of beans or putting them in the slow cooker and then freezing them, and that way I always have, fresh beans on hand.
But we are not all that diligent.
And that's okay. And what I always say is, I would hate for something to hold you back from cooking.
You got your canned beans, and there's no reason that they can't taste just as good.
Right. I think that when people think canned beans, they think that they're cheating, and they think, they're just going to heat them up in the microwave or heat them in a pot. And that's not necessarily true. For me, no matter what, whether I'm using my fresh beans or whether I'm using canned beans, I'm always relying on an amazing and delicious base, and that's our sofrito.
And so if your sofrito is good, your beans will be good.
Yes, but no matter what you're relying on is your sofrito. Whenever you're making sofrito, the first thing you want to do is, with your chopped onions, add them into a hot pan. I like to add my olive oil after that. So we want to instantly saute them, and then almost immediately that they're in there, you want to go ahead and add some salt. We have our onions. They're ready. They have a little bit of color on them, but not too much. We're gonna push them to the side. And we're gonna go ahead and add our bell peppers that are nicely chopped. Use what you have. I like using an array of peppers. I feel like that gives the best flavor. So since we added something new, we're gonna go ahead and add a little bit of olive oil. And then we're gonna add a little bit of salt. And at this point, we'll also add a little bit of sazon. Okay, so we've gotten everything a little bit softer, but like I said, they're holding their shape. So we wanna move them to the side again. I know this sounds so silly, but the minute my grandmother taught me this, it just made so much sense, and it just makes everything taste so much better. So we're gonna add our garlic in there. And a little bit of the oil. As soon as you see that it's kind of cooked through and it's about to turn golden, that's when you want to incorporate everything into the pan. We'll add a little bit of tomato paste, so about a teaspoon. We'll add our bay leaves. And then from here, we'll add a little bit of vino seco. Okay, so I'm getting a spoon just to taste it, kind of make sure that the flavors are exactly where I want them to be. And if I need to add anything at this point, I'll add it now. So if I feel like I need a little bit more sazon, this is when you want to do it. You want those dry spices to heat up so they have a chance to kind of bloom and come to the best flavor that they possibly can. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit more of sazon. Cook that together and our sofrito's done. We have our sofrito ready to go, and what we're gonna add to it at this point is jalapeno. So my grandmother would make this whole vinegary, delicious, peppery mixture. I don't do that. I find that if you just add a few different components, it will get you that little spice that the beans need. And then we're gonna add a little bit of pepper flakes, also same, it's just a tiny amount. Just to kind of waken up all of those flavors, we wanna add it now. And then we're gonna add some cumin. I think cumin is just so overused that people then tend not to use it at all, but it really goes so delicious with something like black beans. It really wakes up their flavor, especially if you're using canned black beans. Okay, so once you're at this point, you'll have your canned beans ready to go. And like in every bean, you kind of have a little bit of that liquid on top. So we're just gonna pour in the liquid at first from all of the cans. So you're just gonna stop at the point where you don't get any beans. If you get a few beans in there, no problem, no stress. It's nothing to worry about. So because I added something new into my pot, you could see how the temperature really went down. So we wanna bring it back up to high again. Let that start to boil. And then we're gonna build the base of our frijoles, which in this case, I use vinegar and sugar. So that's kind of a controversial kind of thing. Some families just add at this point a little bit more vino seco. My grandmother, as I said, would make kind of like a hot pepper vinegar, and that's what gave it the flavor. She used white vinegar. I'm gonna go ahead and use apple cider vinegar. I think it's a little sweeter and just a really nice complement to the beans. We're gonna use equal amounts of vinegar to sugar. So we're trying for it not to taste too much like any of the ingredients. We just want it to get this great flavor and great balance. So we have brown sugar and white sugar. I like the brown sugar and white sugar combination because the white sugar tends for it to be a little too sweet. Again, this is all what you like, maybe what you grew up with, what reminds you of home. Use that. Use whatever makes the most sense to you and whatever makes you happy when you eat it. We're gonna start with it small, so small amounts, and then we can always add more. Okay, once it's been boiling for a couple minutes, just like this, then you want to start adding the beans into it. So keep in mind, of course, the beans are already cooked. Now this is just flavoring everything. So once the beans are all in there, you want to give them a chance kind of mix into everything. And then we are going to be adding some of the liquid that we made from the beans. Okay, so we added about half the can, or about 3/4 of the can full of water. And you're just gonna kind of swish it through. A few beans. So just kind of swish it through, and you end up with so much of that flavorful liquid versus, you know, just adding water. This is much more flavorful. It's gonna add a lot more to the beans. Okay, so like this, they're a little bit more watery. That's exactly what you wanna see because they're going to cook down. And then try not to touch them. Once we see that they're boiling, we'll lower the heat and we'll just let them simmer. So at this point, they've been boiling for a few minutes and we just wanna taste them. And this is when you would kind of, you know, do you. Do you like it more vinegary? Do you like it more spicy? It just kind of depends. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of hot sauce to them. Like I was saying, just to kind of mimic that spice, we've used a jalapeno, we've used the red pepper flakes, and then now a little bit of the hot sauce just to give us different layers of flavor, different dimension to the beans. And that's it, they're ready to serve up. Okay, so our meat boiled for about 2 hours. You can either boil it on the stovetop or you can actually put it in the pressure cooker for an hour.
Okay.
So it just kind of depends what you like to use. I wanted to show you guys the difference between, so this is a flank steak. This is what we showed you, and you can shred it really easily. And then this is a brisket. So as you can see, it had that fat cap when we boiled it.
I had no idea what a fat cap was, so I was really curious.
You're so excited to see this fat cap.
I was trying to keep my plate cool.
And then it's just easier to do. See, this is why I was saying, like, there's no need to do this when it's raw. It's just so much easier to do when it's already cooked, and you just remove it because no one wants to eat that. And then we could just shred it. You could do it with your hands or you can do it with a fork.
Okay. Let's do it with some forks.
Just 2 forks, you pull it apart. There we go. I like to do it like on the cutting board.
Do you mix your meat or you're just doing
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, we can mix our meat. So if it's something like vaca frita, then I like a little bit of big chunks and a little bit of smaller chunks. But if it's something like Ropa Vieja, I kind of like for the chunks to be a little bit bigger, like this, only because as you mix, it's going to break down even more. So if you start with like a little itty bitty thing, you're gonna have a really, really stringy Ropa Vieja. We don't want that.
And Ropa Vieja, yeah, it has to go through all the sofrito and it has to go through a lot.
Right.
Before.
Because now we're gonna basically flavor it with a sofrito. So it needs time, right? And so with that time, you wanna have like a nice big chunk like this guy, and that's gonna really absorb that flavor.
So how did I do?
You did great, you did amazing. Okay, so all these little things, how we were saying, like all the little tendons, little fatty parts of the meat, just, you know, put that to the side, don't use it. Sometimes there's like a little nerve inside, also same, put it to the side, don't use it. We boiled the meat and we're left with a really, really flavorful and intense meaty broth. Do not throw it away. We're gonna use it for our Ropa Vieja. That's the liquid that we're gonna cook everything in. And if you don't use it for that, or if you have a lot and you have some left over, it's an awesome thing like for soups.
All right, we're about done shredding.
I think we're good. Add the onions, and I like to do it as well because you kind of get an idea of how much oil you'll really need. We'll just start off, and then we'll always add salt at the beginning. When we're sauteing, we want to draw out that moisture. I like to use kind of a mix of peppers, just because they all have a special flavor. This is a poblano, it's a little bit spicy, whereas the other ones are, you know, typical bell pepper, really mild. And then since we added something new, we're gonna add a little bit more seasoning. So a little bit more of the sazon and a little bit more salt. We'll go now add our meat. I like adding the meat first and then the liquid, just so like the meat can also marry into all of these flavors. Okay, so once it's totally mixed in, then we can go in with our broth that we have from before from boiling our meat. So how much? Many times on our recipes we'll say 3 to 4 cups or 4 to 6 cups. I think on the recipe we have 4 cups. You have to kind of eyeball it. You don't want to boil it again, so we're not looking to cover our meat again. We're looking to just kind of braise it. And what that means is you want to have enough liquid in there, but you want to see the meat and the veggies kind of peeking out through the top. Okay, so we're gonna let this cook for, let's say 10 minutes, taste it, kind of see if we need to immediately adjust our seasoning, and then we'll let it cook a few more minutes and then we'll taste it again. Another important tip is when we wanna see the meat kind of come to a boil now, we don't wanna constantly be stirring, which I know people have a tendency to wanna move everything, but you don't wanna overstir because that continues to bring down the temperature of your pot. And what you want to do is you want to get it really hot so that then you can lower it once it's boiling, and then it'll kind of boil and braise really slowly.
So we're making 2 cups of rice for our meal. The first thing you're going to need to do is measure out your water. You want 2 and about 1/2 cups of water in your measuring cup. Pour that in. And then you get your heat going. Then you're gonna put in your oil, about 1 tablespoon, and your salt. The trick to a good rice is this point right here, because your rice is gonna taste like whatever this is. So you wanna put in the oil and the salt and then give it like a little bit of a taste, because then you'll have an idea of what your water is gonna taste like, but just be careful. You see, that needs a little bit more salt. I'm gonna just throw it in. And then you're gonna let this get nice and hot. You wanna have a pot where the lid can close completely, because that's gonna be really important. And we think that the clear lid helps, because then you can kind of see what's going on. So you're just gonna leave it there. So you're just gonna give it a good rinse until the water you see here is just coming out clear. All right, we're good. All right, so the water's boiling, and when that happens, you're gonna take your rice that you've rinsed, because rinsing is a really big deal, and you're gonna throw it in and give it a good stir. That is so hot. Okay. All right. Why do you want to rinse your rice? It really takes all the starchiness out of it, and it helps it just cook better and more less mushy. So if you're getting mushy rice, it's probably a you didn't rinse situation. So then you're gonna cover it back up. Again, it's super important to have a lid that closes, and then give it a good mix, and then kind of let it boil on high for about a minute. So you see now it's boiling. You can see it kind of coming up, and that's the point. You're just gonna drop it to low. It's been cooking for about 10 to 12 minutes. It's done, and the first thing you wanna do is take your fork and fluff it. And then now we're gonna take the butter. We're gonna put it in. See, it's kind of melting in. And once you have your butter mixed, you're gonna put a top on, turn off your stove, and kind of let it sit there for 5 more minutes, and then you're good to go. So no Cuban meal is complete without dessert.
And we love natilla.
And that's just my personal favorite.
I love it because you can kind of make it with pantry ingredients, basically. You always have eggs on hand, you always have milk on hand. This is a must in any Cuban pantry.
In any Cuban pantry, you must have.
And then some cornstarch, some vanilla. We're adding in vanilla bean, which usually was just made with vanilla, but I think it just adds those pretty little flecks in it. And no coloring, no added coloring, nothing like that, just all natural, all delicious. Right. Really, really, really special.
Natilla gets it's a little intimidating, because a little tricky, but we're here to break it down for you.
Cristy's traumatized with natilla. We're gonna untraumatize Cristy, and we're gonna teach you guys how to make natilla.
Yes.
First thing we're gonna do is add the leche evaporada. so the evaporated milk, to the blender. When you're working with a blender, you want to add the liquidy stuff to the bottom. It kind of helps and ensures that the other stuff won't stick to the blade. Yep.
Then we're going leche condensada. Ready?
I think we're good. Okay. Then we're gonna go in with our egg yolks. And then now we're gonna do our cornstarch. So we need the measuring cup. We're going to do a 1/4 cup of the cornstarch.
Cornstarch is kind of like, it's what you use to thicken it up a little bit.
Right, so the eggs and the cornstarch are what we need to make it thick. So we're gonna get that in a bowl, and then we're gonna fill this with cold water and whisk it up. So you end up with kind of like just really thin, milky mixture. All right, we're gonna buzz that up. We won't be adding our flavorings until, like vanilla, until the end. Actually, let's add our salt in there. Even if it's dessert, you still want to add a little bit of salt. Helps bring all those flavors to life.
Okay, what are we doing here?
Turn on. Done. Just until combined. You don't want it to get really, really foamy. We're gonna add this to our pot with 3 cups of milk and a sliced open vanilla bean. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add 3 cups of milk to our pot.
What kind of heat are we working with, Annie?
We're at medium. Whenever you're working with natilla, you don't want to be aggressive with your heat because it can really burn on you.
And curdle.
And curdle. The vanilla bean, you just want to help it out, kind of take out all the seeds from inside. And add that in there. And then put this all inside. You can also add canela. You can, it just kind of depends the flavor that you like. I like just adding vanilla. The more and more I make natilla, I just love adding the vanilla.
It's just so simple and delicious.
Clean, delicious. And then we're gonna be moving this with a whisk. It's all you. Or a wooden spoon, but you do wanna move it
right away.
Right away, immediately. You don't want it to get too hot. You don't want it to be so cool that it's not doing anything. You want to get it
on a consistent heat.
Consistent, bubbling. So a lot of times where people go wrong at this point with natilla is they put this in there and then they walk away. You're committed. This is it. It's like you're signing a natilla contract saying that you are going to tend to it for the next 18 minutes.
And this is something I never understood about natilla, but now I do. The reason we added the cornstarch in, and the cornstarch has to get hot enough to thicken. So that's kind of like how you have to view it. If the cornstarch never gets hot, it's not gonna get as thick as you would like it to be.
Right, you have to activate it. Think of yeast. You have to activate it with warm water. So cornstarch, you have to activate it with heat. Just like the eggs, the only way that egg yolks are gonna thicken, they need a little bit of that heat as well.
Here's my question. I am now whisking and I'm touching the bottom. Do I want to be touching the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to touch the bottom because nothing's happening, and you want to make sure that everything's getting incorporated.
All right.
And there's moments where you want to also take out your whisk because if not, it's never going to get hot.
Right.
So trust yourself. You can always come back to it. The minute that you feel the bottom sticking, then you want to move to use
a wooden spoon?
A wooden spoon or a rubber spatula, like a silicone spatula.
Okay.
Either one.
Guys, so this is what I'm feeling. Right now, I'm feeling some stuff on the bottom.
Which is okay.
And I would be freaking out if Annie wasn't standing here telling me that it's okay. So she's saying it's okay. Why is it okay?
Okay, you're working with eggs and dairy, which naturally, they burn if they get too hot. We don't want them to burn, of course, because that would change the flavor, and the smell, but we just want it to keep cooking. So we know we're in good shape here. And the reason why we know that is because it's thick.
Look how thick.
We get these little clumps at the side, so that's telling us that the cornstarch was activated. So everything's gonna be really nice and thick. We wanna avoid getting too much of the natilla on the pan.
Side. So don't freak out like I do and throw your natilla, just gently stir it.
Because think the hottest thing of the pan is the pan.
Yeah,
So
so-
if you're putting products on there, if you're putting the dairy and the eggs on there, it's only gonna burn. So we don't want to do that.
Okay, so look at it. I think this means that we're ready to go.
We're
right?
ready to go. Yes. So from here,
So good.
we're gonna strain it. So this is our insurance also.
I'm gonna grab gloves for me.
Yes, grab gloves. This is our insurance to make sure that none of the little bits from the bottom get to
The bowl.
the bowl. Okay, so when you're putting it in, you see I'm just super lightly and gentle,
Not touching the bottom.
never
stuff.
touching the bottom. Okay, now, immediately from this point, see, this is why we did it. We obviously don't want to eat the vanilla bean and those little bitty things. That kind of changes like the flavor, changes the
Right.
texture. We don't want that. So we'll set that aside. We want all the good stuff. And then one little trick that we've come to find that works for us is we add in about half a cup more of just the room temperature milk. And what that does is it just kind of stops the cooking, so it doesn't keep thickening. And then now is when we want to add the vanilla.
About a tablespoon, right?
About a tablespoon, but
Yeah.
I don't know, I love that vanilla
Yeah,
flavor.
extra.
Can't have too much. And that's it. As it sits, it's gonna get a little bit thicker,
Okay.
right? But this is like really yummy, really good.
Does this count as like my natilla? I made this natilla?
Like half of this is yours.
Okay.
This is like half Kirsty's natilla. Okay. I'm so proud of you.
It's my first successful one.
All right, we're good.
All right. And now you just put that in the fridge.
We'll put this in whatever container you want to serve it in, because once you put it in that container, it will kind of get like a film on the top and it will thicken. So you don't want to put it in the fridge like this if you're not going to serve it like this.
Okay.
All right,
All right. So that's how you do it.
that's how it's done. Let's serve it up.
My favorite part.
I agree. Rice is always first. A good
A
bed
good,
for everything, so it soaks it all up.
All right.
Ropa Vieja, actually, some
Here,
tongs.
you do the ropa vieja and I'll start serving your rice.
Perfect.
Would you like them on top or on the side?
I'm a side kind of girl. And then definitely some salsita.
All right, guys.
We hope you make it. We hope your family loves it. And
I can't wait.
okay.
See you next time.